Now, here is the key difference. If you are a mistake theorist, you will view conflict theorists as simply lacking in information. A conflict theorist has simply not read enough. He or she has not read enough literature in economics or psychology or history. And if they were exposed to the relevant information, they might change their minds. Mistake theorists believe that we can improve the world through increasing education and reducing cognitive biases. They believe that we can reduce bias by being exposed to a range of different viewpoints, even those which are objectively bad, because then we can refine our own arguments. This attitude is summed up with this quote from John Stuart Mill. Here, Mill basically accepts and expresses his own fallibility. He might be wrong, therefore he would never prevent another person from speaking lest they have information that he might not have. The exchange of information helps us move towards a better understanding of the truth. Conflict theorists, on the other hand, do not see the point in debating with one's sworn enemy. If you are a conflict theorist, you are very clear about who is your enemy, and you view mistake theorists as enemies in your conflict. In trying to be objective, the mistake theorist effectively defends the status quo. Now, this is the scary part of the conflict theorist worldview. There is no legitimate space for neutrality or objectivity. You must pick a side. Herbert Marcuse, a prominent figure of the Frankfurt School and pioneer of the New Left, argued for liberating tolerance, which is an Orwellian description of intolerance of anything that the right does and tolerance for anything that the left does. This intolerance of intolerance, which is how it's described, is arguably behind the rise of speech codes, deplatforming on American college campuses, and reduced support for free speech held by my generation and younger. One of the reasons why the conflict theorist perspective is gaining prominence is because it's very popular within our institutions of higher education. The methodology through which conflict theory is taught is known as critical theory. I suspect one of the reasons why critical theory has been so powerful and has become so popular within academia is because of its unassuming name. Who can possibly argue with critical theory? Isn't being critical why we go to university in the first place? What's not to like about critical theory? Well, critical theory is not the same thing as critical thinking. So what is it exactly? Well, to understand what it is, we have to go back to Marx and his observation that philosophers have hitherto merely interpreted the world. The point is to change it. Now, in understanding critical theory, there are two jargon words that are quite useful: descriptive and prescriptive. What scientists generally do is they describe the world as it is. Whenever something is prescriptive, it's telling other people what to do, and scientists or anyone trying to be objective at all times tries not to be prescriptive. However, critical theory collapses descriptive and prescriptive in together. They describe the world while preaching what the world should look like. Critical theorists of the Frankfurt School argued that traditional theory had served the interests of the powerful because traditional inquiry, all traditional philosophy and science, was uncritical towards power. It automatically served the powerful, while critical theory, in unmasking powerful interests, helped serve the powerless. They said that all theory is political, and by choosing critical theory over traditional theory, one could then challenge the status quo. Now, back when the Frankfurt School were developing this theory, this approach was new and fresh, and was no doubt very useful in mobilising emancipatory civil rights movements across the world. But as with all revolutions, as soon as the revolutionaries gain power, they institutionalise their political goals, and the spirit of liberation quickly ossifies into orthodoxy. On campus, at least in the humanities, critical theory is the new orthodoxy. we can see here in critical legal theory taught at ANU that the focus first is on politicising the law by claiming that the law reflects political values. You probably can't read that, it's too small. But the opening sentence is that the law reflects political values. And then it moves into what the subject is going to teach students, and that is thinking about the law through the prism of gender, sexuality, race, the environment, and economics, presumably some form of watered-down Marxist economics. At the bottom of the description, it says the thinkers that influence the course are Karl Marx, Gramsci, Foucault, and Derrida. Now, this is not unique to ANU. You will find a critical legal theory course at all higher education institutions around the country. In many law subjects, it's compulsory. Critical theory now dominates the study of literature. Other humanities subjects are also increasingly influenced by the spectre of this methodology. So that's an art subject. This is international relations. So the study of geopolitics. One might wonder what geopolitics has to do with Marxist critical theory, but the academic explains in the abstract, saying that they want to move international relations away from the positivist approach, which is objective, neutral, and empirical, towards a more prescriptive approach. And he includes the quote from Marx that philosophers have hitherto only described the world and the point is to change it. So what we have is activism sneaking in through the disguise of scholarship. This is another one, critical plant studies. See how the dichotomy of an oppressed group versus oppressed class versus an oppressor class is set up, with humans occupying a privileged space in relation to plants. My personal favourite is critical theory applied to outer space. There is an anthropologist who I've had arguments with on Twitter who argues that outer space needs to be made more queer, that is, there should be fewer white, capitalist and male individuals going into outer space. Another one of his papers argues for environmentalism on Mars, that is, we shouldn't be drilling holes into Mars in case we damage the environment there and in case there is indigenous life in the solar system. These are real papers. Now, more seriously, critical theory has proven as a methodology to be quite capable of critiquing dominant power structures that existed in the mid-20th century. But the thing is that times have changed. Now critical theorists are themselves in a position of dominance. Theirs is the dominant ideology. In the humanities, feminist, queer, and post-colonial approaches of interpretation are the status quo. This reality opens up a challenging and paradoxical situation, because as critical theory becomes more widespread and its adherents more powerful, then critical theory must be turned on itself. But as yet, critical theorists have not shown themselves to be capable of self-critique. When they are in positions of power in universities around the world, there appears to be little self-awareness that they even possess power and exercise it. Foucault is the most cited scholar of all time. He has 873,000 citations according to Google Scholar. Judith Butler's influential book, Gender Trouble, which gave rise to queer theory and argued that gender is a performance and not a biological reality, has been cited over 51,000 times alone. That's just one book. So the problem as I see it today is that critical theory is the status quo within the humanities, but critical theorists cannot apply the theory to themselves. This means that their narratives of power and oppression cannot be falsified. And many of our youth are being educated into believing unfalsifiable narratives. And this is spilling out into our political discourse. Thank you.